Hey guys, it's Crystal from Sober Onions podcast. I am super excited. I'm doing something kind of cool tonight. I'm doing a Sober Onions reunion, and it is June in 2024. And everyone on this call was actually on my podcast, or I was on their podcast in the year 2022. In fact, it's been 22 months between all of our podcasts, which is outrageous that time goes by so fast. Time is a thief. A little bit about myself, as everybody knows, if you're following me, I'm now 3 years sober. I live in Florida instead of California. I have started my new career with Marriott International, and I love it. I travel. I've been all over the United States. I just got back from Texas. First time I've been in San Antonio. God has just blessed me more than I could even ever dream. And I can remember 3 years ago thinking, how would I ever go 14 days without a drink? And that is just blows my mind. And so that was part of the reason I wanted to do this episode, was to bring people back on the podcast that have been living the sober life and give you a little update about what they're doing, so you can follow them and where they're at and what their success stories are, because regardless of it being so hard, as we all know, it is possible. It's just a difficult journey. I am very excited to be here with three of my now friends. I consider a lot of the people that I am friends with now in recovery. I have Martin Lockett. He is here and from my prison life. And then I have David Clemen. I was on David's Recovery Nuggets podcast. And then also Melissa Gissy Witherspoon, who is the author of I'm Sober Now What, which is, I love that. So I'm just going to kind of go around. I want you guys to introduce yourselves. Tell me a little bit about what's going on since I saw you guys, and how people can follow you. And then just tell me something that you feel like, let's say 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, something that you couldn't have told yourself today that was possible. For myself, it would be traveling for my job, because it was definitely a dream of mine. And my first and foremost was just my dream of not drinking. And once I was able to work on my dream of not drinking, I was able to start working on my career dreams and my family dreams. And so I'm going to start with, how about you, Martin? Martin, let's start with you. Tell me about you. We were in an episode that cut off a little bit, but it was about my prison life, and it was a little bit more about your testimony. So tell me just a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and thank you again so much for your time, for being here tonight.
Of course, Crystal. Thank you so much for inviting me back. So my name is Martin Lockett. I am now, since we last spoken, a couple years ago. So I'm now the director of cultural engagement at my organization, which is a phenomenal position. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So that's kind of my 9 to 5, if you will, and I have totally taken off in my speaking career. Whereas in 2022, I was trying to get on every podcast known to man, woman, and child, just to kind of get my story out there, and that has led to many more opportunities to speak in person. I do a lot of law enforcement conferences. I just did one today, about a half hour from where I live. I've traveled. I've gone to New York to do tours in colleges with the Save a Life tour around DUI prevention and texting and driving prevention. So I've traveled a lot and done a lot more in-person events, and life is beyond remarkable and phenomenal for me these days. So thank you.
That is awesome. And if you don't know who Martin is, you obviously are very transparent about getting a DUI when you were 17 and actually killing someone. And so you went to prison for that. And so your book talks a lot about that. I know right now in the media, Justin Timberlake just got arrested for the DUI. And it's unfortunate, because I always think that could have been me. It should have been me. How many times? And the only thing I think that will spin positively from it is it just really puts some awareness about drinking and just being intoxicated in general, whether it be drinking or drugs, that there's no requirement. We are all susceptible to any of the effects. It's not a money or fame or anything like that. It's truly the effect that it has on you. And that's in fact why they call it spirits, is because it has a wicked effect on you. So that's why they call liquor spirit. So thank you so much. So I'm going to move on to Melissa. So tell me, Melissa, where are you? What are you doing? Tell me about your book. I know I see everything and I'm so happy for you.
I'm so excited to be back on here talking with you. You were one of the first people that I did a podcast with. I was so new to that whole entire world, through my book launch. And we became friends very fast, and so it's been really cool staying connected and watching all of the growth and everything that you've been doing. And I've been growing too, one day at a time, really. I think last time we talked, I had just launched I'm Sober, So Now What? A Journey, Hope, and Healing. And I pulled it shortly after our podcast, and I self-published it because I came to a quick realization that the money was meant to go back into the recovery community. And so I've been forming a nonprofit, Sober Now. And so it's a thing. I have a nonprofit where it's become a ministry, and I go out and I share my testimony and I connect with others. And the writing journey, I write in my book that I never thought that I would be an author. That's just not anything that was ever in my sight. But through recovery and growing a relationship with God, I learned that was a gift that I was granted to share my story with others. So that's what I've been doing ever since we first met. And I haven't stopped. And so it's turning into a series of books. I'm Sober, So Now What series. And I've written with a couple of other books with women world leaders, and those have gone best-selling. The book I'm Sober, So Now What got on Times Square on the billboards. That was really cool. This is probably my favorite, is that speaking of DUIs, that's very much part of my story. I was a habitual violator and I was looking at prison time. And the accountability courts, they now hire me to come back and motivate at the national or at the state national conventions to motivate the people who facilitate the programs. So not only am I able to advocate for the recovery community, but I'm also on the other end helping and inspiring the people that facilitate programs. So I'm kind of like playing both sides of the fence. It's really cool. So I'm never bored. But that's
your
it.
mother. Don't forget your mother.
Oh yeah, I wear many hats. I got kids grown and still in the house. And I work a day job. I work at a church. That's where I stay humble. I promised that I would always keep that job there because it grounds me. It keeps me, I do a lot for the recovery community, but I also have to manage my own recovery program, right? And so I know that is where I belong. I need a place to go home. And so that's definitely still constant in my life. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I have a lot of writing projects. I get to write in magazines. I was having like imposter syndrome situation earlier today because I have a huge schedule coming up, and it's a lot of going out, and some of it's in the trenches, some of it's I just feel like totally blessed that I get to do this kind of stuff. And then I think to myself, like, is this real life? Like, who would have thought that the girl that was on her basement floor trying to take her own life 11 years ago could be using that story to help other people to build communities and unity within those communities. And it's a blessing. And this is it, like what we're doing right now. Now I've met 2 new friends, David and Martin. It's super cool. I love it. So thanks for having me on again.
Of course, of course. And it's always exciting to hear how you guys are giving back. And when someone's listening and they're new into recovery, it almost seems overwhelming. And you said something key about, thinking about your own recovery. And that was something that I really had to swallow my pride with and step away from my own podcast, because I love doing this, but it was really becoming a job to me. And that wasn't why I started it in the first place. And I knew I needed to work more on myself before I could really give back. And I felt like I was so raw at the beginning. It related to so many people, but then I felt like I just did an episode, it was almost like sober floating, like kind of just not even knowing what I was going to be doing with my life because I lost everything. So hip hip hooray 1 year, but now what do I do with myself? And so, because the first year you just can't think, it's like, it's a blur. And then it was like going into my second year, I was like, I don't know what to do, and I was like, okay, what do I want the most? And that was to get my family back, because neither one of my daughters were speaking to me. And now one of my daughters is speaking to me. I live in the same zip code as her. These are huge, things that I looked at that I thought, there is no way this is ever going to happen. And like, where do I start? That was really the biggest thing, was I could hear all your guys' stories. I was the new kid on the block willing to talk about it. But I didn't understand too, like all of you guys have been in recovery for before there was Instagram, before there was Facebook. Like you really had to do it with so much more strength. I feel like my generation of recovery has it a lot easier. We have so many resources and it's just everywhere. And that's where I needed to kind of pull myself back and say, all right, what do I need in my recovery now? Like, what's the next step? Because it's a journey, as we say it's a loose term. It's a beautiful journey, and it's journey here and it's journey there, and it's like journey this, and it's like it's a freaking mess is what it is. And so what we're trying to do is put it all together in one lane. So it's like I didn't know really what to do with myself. And the first thing was really going, I love giving back and I love being out there and transparent, but I really do have to take a look at my own recovery, and not necessarily being selfish. It's just really, I couldn't do it. I couldn't start a new career and do recovery side work. Basically, it just was too much for me, and I had to really swallow my pride and say, what, I can, when God says it's time again, then it'll be time again. And so I felt him nudging, and that's why I'm here. So and I really do feel like it's a little wave again. I feel like we're getting another wave of, we really need to put some hope out there. Right now we're like at what is it? I think stats are 190 a day deaths. I mean, it's rising, and it's not getting better. We would think we would have all these great resources and all these, super successful sober stories, and our numbers are rising. We're not decreasing anything. There's not less DUIs. There's not less deaths. There's not less fentanyl. There's not less of anything with the more resources. So we can't stop. We have to continue to grow and continue to encourage the person like me who's listening to people like you go, you know what, maybe I should tell my story. My story's similar. I mean, it's not the same, but it's similar. I mean, I have no DUIs, but you guys are all sitting here. We all have something in common, So with that, David, tell me a little bit about you, how you've been.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me on, Crystal, and it's good to see Martin, and nice to meet you, Melissa. And I was just kind of chuckling because when we were on Crystal's, she was in an RV in California and the signal wasn't great and so forth. But people's lives change and they move on and they progress. And like, that's one really cool thing about recovery is like, we build momentum as long as we continue to do the work. And the work is like being of service to others and working on myself and giving back, and then showing up as kind of a productive member of society, and like I learned that I'm a 12-step person. I don't share which one I'm affiliated with just because of the traditions, etc. But all of that stuff makes me a more well-rounded person. And like, sometimes we hear about being selfish in our recovery. And what I've learned is like, it's not so much about me being selfish in my recovery. It's about selflessness, okay, and setting healthy boundaries. I got here because I was selfish. So I have to be like very careful about my words, and words are important, like and it's important to just learn to set a healthy boundary for my recovery versus like, well, I have to be selfish. No, that's not really, that's kind of misses the whole spirit of how recovery works for, like, someone showed me how to do it, so I can show others how to do it, and it's that's kind of the message of hope for me is each one teach one, give back. And it's funny because I'm actually on the 12th step right now, which is all about we give back, and so on a personal note, I got engaged this weekend. Um, and that's another gift for recovery because I got married in recovery. I got divorced in recovery. It was really messy. I was one of these, I'm never doing that again. It was too painful, but with some time away from that and then meeting the right person. And then also, here's the thing about recovery is like looking at myself and how I was in the marriage and the person I was at that time and the person she was and how she changed. Um, Time really gives us some perspective without like the pain so much. And like I'm able to be really understanding of how it all went down, But I didn't start there, and I didn't start there in my recovery either of why I used in the first place. And so, and staying and recovering, doing the inner work, like I just started to do a deep dive on trauma the past few years of the exact nature of why I used and like doing EMDR therapy and doing other modalities to process that trauma, you know. Um, but I had to stay clean long enough to get there. In the beginning, it was just learning how not to use. But as time went on, why did I use? It's kind of like I heard a long time ago, like if drugs ran you to recovery, what ran you to the drugs in the first place? And that's like the hardcore notion of why I still do this thing, It's like what drove me to find that was the right answer to whatever the question I was asking. You know what I mean? It's like I got to get to that and then I can get the freedom. Um so as far as in giving back and stuff and doing education and stuff this year, I took a peer support specialist class. I did a RAP class, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. I haven't got a job in that yet. I still have a full-time job. In March, I did a fundraiser where I did the Mission 22. It raises awareness for former veterans suicide prevention, and it was a 48-mile walk where you're rucking, where you wear the rucksack, and so I ended up raising almost $1,000 for that charity. I was invited by one of my guests on the podcast. She lost her son to fentanyl, and she started a nonprofit called No Hope. It's spelled KNOW, Hope, in North Carolina, and they basically put those electronic billboards up throughout the state of people who have lost their lives to fentanyl. And so she invited me to the North Carolina Alcohol and Drug Conference, where it was really cool because they had a judge, a probation officer, and another probation officer on a panel, and they shared their perspective on drug court and how it actually does work. It's not so punitive as the judicious side. Um, and then they even had the ABC board come in there, and I was like, why would they bring these people in here? They're the ones peddling alcohol, but they were talking about how much money they actually spend in education to bar owners and things like that. And I had to open my mind a little bit to hear what she was saying because at first I was judgmental, right? I'm like, oh, they shouldn't be here. But wait a minute now, it's not a problem for everyone. So I really had to take a look at like, all right, where's my judgmental stuff coming up, right?
Absolutely.
And then yeah, and I have that kind of stuff. That's how recovery has worked for me is like if I'm feeling some resistance to something, it's probably something with me and I need to just okay, let's try and understand more versus
Right.
you need to understand where I'm coming from. And those are just some of the big gifts of
I think that's
recovery.
the hardest thing too, is for people to understand. And I think that's why we gravitate to each other, because we can understand and understanding that it's not the drink, because people that don't have addiction problems, or not problems, issues, they can't comprehend why you can't put it down, And like when I travel, I'm with people who drink all day long, but they don't they don't drink more than one or two, you know, they drink one at night and they're back the next day at the conference. And I'm like, I couldn't do this job. I would be drunk, like, and then not show up and then get fired and then blame it on them because it was their fault. And, you know, it's like but I have to reel myself in that drinking is not a problem for everyone. And I also have to be real with my true self and myself that is in recovery, that there are the issues that drove me to drink. For instance, you know, I moved back to Florida, right? So now I'm smack facing with my kids stuff, right? And now the dad's back in the picture and he's, you know, Disneyland dad, and I'm going, and then I'm like, oh, this is why I drank. You know, this isn't about liking vodka or rum or, you know, a pina colada. Like that is not what it is for me. It's the trauma and realizing, wow, I am still hurt from someone cheating on me 25 years ago. Like, this is an issue. That's not his fault. This is my fault. He's moved on. Like, nobody's thinking about me. I'm the only one wasting time on it. But it's taking me still. I'm at year 3 and I'm still like, hand it over to God, give it over to God, you know, things. And it's like, my biggest question is like, God, how do I give this to you? Like, how am I supposed to give this to you? And when I don't have those answers, that's when I go to my 12-step program, or I go to my church, or I go to my friends. Those are the things that I had to lay down in order to take that, you know, that time for myself. And I tell people all the time, it's like it's a different road, you know, concrete versus dirt roads. You know, if you have a concrete road, it's a smoother ride, you know, and that's because I'm trying to lay the cement before the issues get there. And so you have to put the work in to get the results. And I know that that's kind of hard to do, and it's easier said than done, because this stuff comes out when I'm not even thinking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need Jesus. Like, this is not this, like I was like, congratulations, happy 3 years, you're amazing, you're this, you're that, and I'm like, I'm over here like just pissed off about the dumbest stuff. And I'm like, this is why I drank, or my keys got locked in my car. Like, it was the dumbest stuff, you know. It was like harboring all those things. And my sister asked me, you know, how do you do your job? You know, I know you're around alcohol all the time. I can't, as a non-alcoholic, as a non-person addiction, she's like, I have to be honest, and I just have to ask you. Like, I don't understand it. And I made it very simple. I said, listen, it's like moving. Have you ever moved your U-Haul? Have you ever lived in a different zip code? It's just moving to a different zip code. I'm still Crystal. I still brought the stuff from my closet. I still have every room in the house. And I still left my ex in the other zip code. Like, I still have me. I just choose not to go back to where I was. And I can't go back to where I was, because for me, it was life or death. And so if that helps. And she said, you know, that really does help, because I have moved. I can relate to that. I don't want to move back into the house that me and my husband have now, because we have 2 kids now. We wouldn't fit, you know? So, like, to be able to relate to people how we're doing it is hard sometimes too, but I think it's also important to put out there, like, what we're doing, you know, what is it? Because people who don't have the courage to, you know, write a book, or, you know, I heard on a podcast the other day, she said, oh, everybody's writing a book. And I'm like, I'm not writing a book. That's too hard. What are you talking about? Who is this lady saying it's easy to write a book? Like, I don't think so. I couldn't even barely do a journal. Like, so it's like, you do the writing, and I could barely publish that. So I'm impressed. Like, I know, Melissa, you are in kind of similar situations, especially with women. Women's are big, we're askers. We're not afraid to ask you how you're doing it. Like, what do you feel like women come to you and say, like, how are you doing this?
I mean, it's so cliche, but I can't help it. It's my truth. One day at a time. And sometimes I start off the day, and I always start off the day in gratitude. I do. It's my go-to. And prayer. I just have this remedy that over the last decade I've been able to cultivate. And when it wasn't working, I reevaluated it. In every meeting and every relationship that I've built along this journey, I've taken something from it. Like, you know, I'm a kid at a candy store. I'm like all in. I want to know, well, how could I use that? How can I'm constantly evolving. And I know that there's no, I got sober and this is it. The now what is the constant growth and the one day at a time and the living the life. And so I tell people that, and they sometimes look at me like I have 2 heads, but you know what? My track record's a lot better than it used to be. You know what I mean? And it's because I follow that religiously, and I know that all I have is today. And so when I start
Sure.
looking back, or I start looking too far ahead, I mean, you have to plan. I have to plan. I'm a mom. I'm an administrative assistant at a church. Like, I run people's calendars. I have to look into the future, but I don't have to be living there, right? I need to be living right where I am today. And I'll find some days I tell myself that on a mantra, like on repeat, like a song that you can't get out of your head. You're like, and you're like, how do I get this out of my head? I have to like do that to myself. Yeah. And then there's some days that it's easy going, everything's falling into place. And I'm like, I love life. This is great. Some days I can't wait for the sun to go down, I'm like,
yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. It is. It's different. It's different. I don't understand my lens now sometimes, because I'm like, what was I thinking like before? That part's confusing, and it's like, I know for you, Martin, you speak to a lot of the future of us, the generation that's coming next. And I think that would be even more confusing. Like, how can we go without having all these mistakes when we're completely told that drinking, driving, drugging, and all of this is okay on a constant day-to-day? Do you feel like your testimony sometimes is strong enough, or there is things that you have come across that is like, you see this a repeat question?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. When I was speaking at the conference today, I was telling them how, our society is so, we become so immune to the dangers of drinking and driving, right? I mean, alcohol is literally everywhere. Like, since when did they start having alcohol at baby showers? Like, literally at baby showers. What does alcohol have to do with celebrating the fact you're going to give birth to this beautiful human, and we're here to give you gifts and show you like, where does alcohol come in? So it is pervasive. It is everywhere, right? And we know that people are leaving those baby showers and probably not taking an Uber home, right? So we have made alcohol, the consumption of alcohol, every get together we congregate for, alcohol is involved. So it is everywhere. But I'll go back to what David said, and when he started speaking and he talked about boundaries, right? So how do we do this? It's as simple as, it's not simple. It's simple, but it's not easy, right? Especially for people who are very much people pleasers, because I was a people pleaser. And I always needed everybody to accept me, and I needed everybody's validation. And so I couldn't say no to anybody pretty much for anything. But where did that get me, right? It got me to become a full-blown alcoholic by age 16, and in prison for 17 and a half years at age 24, right? And got out of prison at 42, right? So I missed a lot of great years of my life because I couldn't say no to people. And so now, I remember that. I remember what not saying no to people, where it got me, right? Mm-hmm. So I can either assert this boundary, which is uncomfortable, admittedly, at first. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, like any kind of habitual thing. So it's either I ruffle a few feathers or make some people a little uncomfortable, or I compromise my sobriety, right? I compromise my recovery, and I know where that road leads. And so for me, that makes it as simple as can be, right? There is nobody on planet Earth who is going to be worth me compromising my recovery and everything that I've built since then, and everything that I've gone through as a result of my addiction, right? And so just kind of putting it in those black and white terms for me makes it easier. I'm not saying it's easy even today, because at the end of the day, we all still want to be accepted and we want to be liked, but I want to be liked and accepted and respected by the right people, right? Correct. By the right people who respect my recovery, people who respect my boundaries, people who want to see me do well, people who want to hold me accountable, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the people that I aspire to, to please, if you will.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I felt that a lot when I went in to start working corporate, because I owned my own business for a very long time. And that's why I got away with being a functional drunk for so long. And in the corporate world, especially in my world with hospitality, alcohol's everywhere. And I was like, oh, what if I know I'm an alcoholic? Or like, what if we're at a conference and I say I don't drink? Are they going to ask me why? And I did all this worrying. And at this point, now that I'm 2 years in, people know I don't drink and nobody asks me why. And no one even cares if I do or don't drink. But that's how I felt, and my feelings were valid. And I talked to my sponsor about it, and she was like, nobody cares, but continue to waste time on it if you'd like. And I still did. But it's like, and I don't even consider myself a people pleaser, but it's like I had all these emotions and my coping mechanism was grabbing a drink and not dealing with it. And so it was like just even the smallest things, people might call them triggers, because they weren't triggering me to drink. It was triggering me to figure something else out besides drinking. Like I would never feel like, oh, that triggers me, I'm gonna go drink, or don't mention that, that's a trigger. Like for me, it just brings this like newness up in me, and I'm like, I'm 44, there's nothing new in my life, I know everything, right? And so I get uncomfortable in my own skin, and then that's when I start being like, well, yeah, I just don't feel like it tonight, or I'm on a health binge. Like no one cares, like, like, but we get all worked up. So we're running out of time. I swear I could do this all day. I can't even believe it. I want to I knew it was gonna be fast. I want to thank you guys. I'm going to allow you guys to, if you guys would just shoot me a little email with a little insert I could put for everyone here that's listening today so they can find you, follow you. If there's a cause that you're doing, if you're fundraising for something, please let me know. I'd like to stay in the know for that so we can help as many people as possible. And I just want to say thank you. If you guys just want to say something before you go out, and then I'll close out. We got 2 minutes. So go ahead, Melissa, what's your final words?
I just want to tell anybody out there that's listening that I love you, and that we do recover one day at a time. So keep going, stay connected. The unity is going to be a source of strength for you. And I'm just grateful for today and to be surrounded by all you beautiful people.
How about you, David?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this was great. It's good to see everybody, and nice meeting you, Melissa, for the first time. Yeah, recovery is worth it. That's what I'd like to share, and I will pass it to Martin.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us back on. This was an absolute joy. So great to meet Melissa. I would say for the newcomer, it can certainly seem very overwhelming and frankly impossible, especially if you're thinking about being sober for the next year or 5 years or 10 years. And I mean, I know it's cliche, but we literally do this one day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time, sometimes 10 minutes at a time. Right. And we string together enough of that and we find ourselves in years of recovery. Lastly, we do not do recovery in isolation. None of us are that strong or smart or whatever we think we are. We do it in community. And there is a huge community, especially on Instagram, where you can find me at Martin L. Lockett. I'd love to connect and to be that support.
Awesome. This is so fun. I feel like the sober Brady Bunch. Like we're all like, I just looked down and yeah, you guys just look down. You guys will be able to see this video on YouTube. Again, thank you so much for everybody for your time. This is Crystal Morrell from Sober Onions Podcast. Remember, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks, guys. I'll send this out. Shoot me an email with your stuff. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.